Okay guys, there's a bit of a Voge trilogy this month, as well as the 800 DSX and that little 125 ADV. Voge has also kindly loaned me this 625, or dropped it off for me to test, which is quite kind of them, and that's how they realise they've you know what they need to do to get a good toe in the market, get it out to people, to give it coverage, and they're very good at doing that, I have to say. Very good, very proactive, which is what a lot of importers aren't. And you realise actually there's a lot of bikes that are very quite similar, but it's down to how well the importers can push their bikes to, you know, to get them traction, so to speak. So this is a 625, which is an evolution of the 525, which I did quite like. I rode it last year. And it's you know, it's almost like a direct copy of the CB500Xs. So it sort of stood out for the accessories it had on, but not necessarily for the way it rode. It rode well, and it rode, you know, pretty much as well as a Honda, but it was almost sort of sometimes difficult to justify the saving over the Honda, for the fact that, you know, with a Honda you know exactly what you're getting. They were too equivalent on spec to stand up apart. But with this 625 we've got 63 brake horsepower rather than 47, so we've got an extra 100cc or thereabouts. We've got a 270 degree crank, so I think it's the same stock engine, you same bottom end but a different top end, and well, a different crank to give it that extra power, and hopefully that little extra bit of character to set it apart. Price wise 5995, so you know, again, great value, which is what Voge major on. This in calipers, KYB forks that are adjustable. We've got a great standard, well, they're not standard, they're optional, 6995 for the top case and the side panniers, which are very good quality, I've got to say, from Voge. We've got tubeless spoke tyres, which is a nice touch, which means, you know, easy to plug and fix if you do get a puncture. 17-inch rear, 19-inch front, removable rubber pegs, crash bars are standard, hand guards, USB there, and a 12 volt there. Yeah, not 12 volt there, and then this, I can't remember how this works. You know, an adjustable screen, which is a nice touch, not the easiest thing in the world to use, but backlit instrumentation. We've got a 3,750 mile service interval. Again, E5 runs on, or chooses to run, or prefers to run. Quite a nice dash on that. And that's it. Traction control, ABS, span adjustable levers, which is a nice touch, which you don't always get on the Japanese stuff. So all in all, in the showroom, that looks great value and a good quality bit of kit. How will it ride? Well, go for a spin. Okay, first point of discussion I think is the ergonomics of this bike. Having ridden that 800 DSX, you can see how they have really designed that as an adventure bike. So lower pegs, a little bit further back, less cockpit here, more of a, I guess, a larger capacity adventure bike setup. Whereas this feels more road derived, like a transplant from a road bike to something more adventure style, but still road biased ergonomics. So the pegs are a little bit high and a little bit forward, almost like a V-Strom 650. The bars are also a little bit closer to you. They don't feel as, you don't feel as though you're as quick to attack, get into an attack position as you are on the 800. Which for people who are going to ride this on road, and let's not pretend this is an off-road bike, it's probably going to be better because you're in a nice comfy position. The pickup and go there is actually quite nice. It's definitely stronger than the 525 and the 500 bikes. I was out on my Motor Marine Escape 650 yesterday, which is 60 brake horsepower, so actually it's 2 down on this. And I would say that this feels a little bit fresher, a little bit fruitier than that 650 bike. And when you think that I got words out, Motor Marine Escape came out at 7.5, and the new one is 6.7. Got to make you alright. Head on head. You know, the new one is 6.7, whereas this is, what is it? This one is 5.995 on the road. It makes you realise how much value you're getting. Yes, that new Escape has got a bit more power now, 72 brake horsepower, but I kind of find horsepower is not that relevant on a bike like this. Yes, it's necessary for propulsion, but you're not buying this bike for all out speed, and therefore 62 brake horsepower is as good as 72 brake horsepower. You know, you might not agree with me on that, and that's fine, but this certainly feels brisk enough. just looking, it looks like we've got a ride-by-wire throttle. You can tell because you've got a slight sponginess, springiness in the throttle before it picks up, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. I've got to say the controls are very good, everything's light, clutch is nice and light, cable operated. The suspension is quite supple along this back road. It rides nicer than that CB650, it doesn't fidget as much. Let's open it up a bit. I mean, it's definitely got guts, it's got get up and go. And you can tell there is a difference between this and say that 800 DSX that I've been riding, but again, how much performance do you need from your bike? That's obviously a personal decision, but I wouldn't ever get off this bike or ride this bike and say it's slow, because you've got strong pickup there. That's really... Well, I don't know if you saw that speed, but that was a quick brisk up to 71. That was, I don't know, 4th gear pick up and roll and go. So we've got acceleration power. We've got excitement on the throttle, which is not something you ever said of the 525s and the NX500s. So I'm impressed with that engine. However, they've done this, and it does seem an in-house adaptation that Voge has made to increase the stroke or bore, I'm not sure which, and change the crank to a 270 to give it a bit more character. But it definitely seems successful. Chassis wise as well, and these back roads of Devon are very good testers for adventure bikes. It does remain sure-footed and capable. We've got good brake feel. I've got those Nissan calipers, so I have got I think I've got a twin disc up front. Weight on this bike, I don't recall what the spec sheet weight is, but I'm going to say it's in that 230 ballpark. You know, all these Chinese bikes of this denomination tend to be around about that figure. Whoop. Got stuck in traffic. This is Devon traffic for you. I think he's going to go up my test lane. I was going to do a little bit of a green lane with you just to see what it's like, see what the standard position's like. I've got to say I'm more impressed immediately with this bike, and sometimes first impressions are different to time spent on the bike, and your impressions can change over time, but first impressions are very impressive actually, are very positive. I was not expected to be, you know, that interested in riding it, I've got to be honest. When they said we'll drop it down, I was kind of, yeah, okay, that's fine. But you can see how this, for somebody who is coming down from a 1000cc bike, still wants a bit of squirt, wants excellent value, you can see when they'd walk into a showroom and see it at 5995, go, yeah, I'll have one of them, why not? You know, where's the argument against it? You didn't want one really. Oh, he's good up there, you swine, never mind. See that second gear pickup, that's strong, that is strong. I think that overreads a little bit. I don't think I hit 70 then, it says I did, but I think that's a good 10% out. I'm not convinced we're at 70, but it still felt brisk. Whee! Oh, it's a good engine, I tell you what. This is a get up and go engine. It's got stuff. It's got something off the bottom. It doesn't need a lot of rev to build. You know, it doesn't need a lot of build up to get it going. That 800 conversely that I rode, the DSX, that was quite linear. It didn't off the bottom. It didn't get up and go. And actually, this compared to that, I bet there's not that much difference up to sort of 40 miles an hour, or even on roll-on acceleration. I don't think there was probably that much. Obviously that bike's got an extra, 30 horsepower on it, so it will get away from this eventually or at some point, but I don't think this would be embarrassed. I think it's a cleanless off that initial quarter throttle, or on that initial quarter throttle. Like there, that's 4th gear pickup, and I mentioned the same about the 800. Off the bottom at high revs, you know, on these sort of winding tracks where I tend to ride a tall gear because I don't want the engine revving up, I want it quite relaxed, so I tend to ride a tall gear. And the measure of a good bike is that ability there, 3rd gear pickup, 20 miles an hour. I'm not busy on the box, I'm not having to ride around a snatchy throttle. I've got good immediate controls. And what I find that tends to do, certainly when you're a long way from home, is allow you to relax. It allows you to settle into the scenery and look around and be observant. You're not having to spend a lot of effort on riding the bike. So good basic controls are pretty essential, and not, you know, they're not blanket across all bikes that come out. Some are pretty woeful. Sounds pretty good. I haven't got my earplugs in, so I can hear that engine. There is a bit of a blat out the exhaust. Not offensive in any way, but pleasant. I think we're running Metzeler Torrance tyres. Don't quote me on that, but they look like Metzeler Torrance, sort of, you know, a slight hint of trail, but actually just a road tyre with a bit deeper groove, which I think suits this bike quite nicely. Gearbox is nice and crisp. I'm going to come into a tight left-hander here. It's always a good test of a bike's balance. Doesn't feel top heavy, doesn't feel a heavy bike actually. Second gear down, I'm going down to first. Look up through that corner, ride it through in first. I had two people drop me A2 bikes on a similar corner the other day, which always makes me cry, but they were alright and the bikes were as well, so no damage done. I'll get out of here and get it to the open road in a second. Quite like the dash. It's a little bit busy, it's a little bit 1990s disco, but there's a lot, you know, it tells me everything I need to know. I'm actually in eco mode, so I've got riding modes. Oh, okay, oh, here we go, riding mode. Yeah. Let's have a look what we've got. Okay, so that was in eco mode. Well, I've got to say, eco mode was quite impressive. What I find sport mode tends to do with bikes is artificially sharpen the throttle, which artificially gives you a bit more character, although it doesn't actually make much difference. So we'll see how we go in sport mode. Glad I looked down and noticed that then. Yeah, it's a little bit Casio, isn't it, that? But, you know, these TFT screens like this, they're going to be cheaper than clocks. People say, why don't they put old-fashioned clocks on bikes? Well, anything that moves with mechanical parts in it is far more expensive than just a slab of liquid, whatever it is, that LCD that makes that screen work. You know, to look at the price of iPads or mobile phones now to know that that's probably that cost tuppence, where a moving dial has probably cost 3 tuppence. And on these bikes at these prices, it is all about saving money, and that's where you can start to bring in compromises, because obviously the bike is designed to be cheap, and to make something cheap you cut corners, you put lesser quality products, components on it, and sometimes it's a question of identifying those lower quality items, components on the bike, and seeing if they impact on the bike sufficiently to make it even not worthwhile bothering even at a cheap price. But I have to say there is no part of this at the minute that feels cheap. The longevity of these bikes are always questioned. As I say, I was out on the Marina yesterday, the X-Cape, and that bike's done 11,000 miles, which I know in the grand scheme of things is not a lot, but it still rides tight, still on its original chain, still on the original pads. I don't think I've actually done anything to it other than a couple of services. And that's a Chinese built bike, and 5 years old, you know, it's 5 years old model. And things do rapidly improve with the Chinese bikes. I guess the obvious alternative to this bike is get a 2-year-old V-Strom 650, which is going to last you forever, of accessible parts forever, depreciate very little, and, you know, never go wrong. That's the beauty of those old of the Japanese bike. It's up to you. You could argue a case for both, second-hand Japanese or brand new Chinese. There's obviously arguments for both. Depends what kind of person you are. There are just some people who are attracted to new bikes, and if they offer great value, then all the better for it. And then there's other people who just want an established brand that they know and trust, and I get both arguments. It's not a fast bike. It's never going to be a fast bike, but it's a brisk bike. And I actually think that, for people who wanted a CF Moto or something like that, but want a little bit more punch, or who have got a 500X, who want a bit more punch, who have got a TRK 502, who want a bit more punch. This has got that bit more punch. I'm impressed with this engine actually. I've got to say, I think it's a nice engine. It's got some character to it, it's got some brawn to it, a bit of charisma and a bit of excitement. I still think that's massively overreading. Well, not massively, but it's definitely on the high side. Oh, I don't know, 56. I'd say I'm doing 50. So yeah, 10% over. I've got tyre pressure sensors as well. One's binging at me at the front. It says it's a little bit low. It's not that bad. We're fine at that. But I have to say, I am not unimpressed by this bike, or I'm certainly more impressed than I thought. You know, and I think a large part of it, what you make of a bike when you ride it, is your expectations and how does it match with expectations. Now, I didn't have any great expectations of this bike. I thought it might be a little bit better than the 525 I rode last year, but in actual fact, I think it's quite a big step up from that. I think it feels more compliant in the suspension. I think the engine definitely feels peppier, stronger, and more character. So I think if you're choosing between this and the 525, it's a no-brainer. This exceeds my expectations, and I wouldn't be disappointed in this. I think, in comparison a little bit, with that 800, obviously they're building it up as a Tenere killer, you know, the cut price Japanese warrior off-road thing. That puts a lot of pressure on a bike to perform, and then you're far more meticulous in your scrutiny. And you start asking a lot more questions of it, and I think it's almost does it a disservice to hype something up to that point which nothing can live up to or struggles to. And I just think it's a point worth making. If you build a bike up to be superb, it needs to be beyond superb to be superb, to match those expectations. So yeah, just be realistic about what you're buying, you know. Like the guys about that 800, when I put it weighed 240 kilos, they're like, well, how can it, Voge says it's 213, I'm not going to buy one. Well, you know, what part of you looking at an 800cc bike with 24 litres of fuel and all those accessories honestly thought it was going to weigh 213 kilos? Like, it never was. So the manufacturers build an expectation, and you yourselves build an expectation, which often the case a bike has struggled to live up to. This is the alternative. This is the opposite. This had, in my mind, no expectation, but I really like it. I really like it, actually. If you rode one of these away from your dealer, having given him £6 grand, you'd think you got deal of a century. One thing I'd need to assess a little bit longer is the seat comfort. The Chinese bikes tend to have quite firm foam in them, which can make them uncomfortable. This is firm, but not as firm as others. That Rave 500 Adventura is, I've got to be honest, it's pretty terrible. I struggle on that because it's that firm of foam. You just can't get comfortable on it. Well, I can't. No, I've got a bad hip. My hip gives me trouble, and yeah, I struggle on that Rave. This don't feel too bad. It's not quite as forgiving as that 800 Voge, but it's not bad. I'll tell you what, it's those ripple bumps, bum ba bum ba bum. That's a measure of a good setup suspension or decent suspension. It can ride these waves of a back road without unsettling the bike, without slowing your pace. It's a good rider's bike. Yeah, we sometimes think these cheap bikes are just, you know, because you want something cheap and you want to go slow and you don't want to press on and you don't actually care about motorcycling, you just care about getting somewhere. This rides with a purpose, actually, with a spirit to it, a sense of gusto. And that's sort of transmuted through the engine and the suspension. Both are quite harmonious in the way they're able to craft their way down this road with guile, with bite, with energy, with finesse. And they're not words, that's not a sentence you would have applied 2-3 years ago to a Chinese bike. And I always, every video at the minute seems to be bagging on about Chinese bikes, but whether you like them or not, they are relevant for the fact that they are riding as well as the Japanese stuff. Come on. So you have to start. I mean, that clutch, that pickup from standstill is lovely and smooth. Nice clutch. So if they're riding so well now and they're getting more reliable, you know, you do have to again come back to the question of what is the Japanese's USP if it's slowly all being eroded by these bikes. So what do they stand for? What do they represent that justifies them being more expensive than this? And it's a question only the Japanese can answer. It's not for the Chinese to worry about or me to worry about. It's for the Japanese to say, okay, the Chinese are here, they're coming. What can we do? How do we respond to this? Because their bikes are riding as well as ours. They're pretty much almost as well built as ours. And in fairness, we build a lot of our bikes in China, so that's a mute question. What can we do? And I think the only answer that Japan has got is innovation. When you think back to the 60s and 70s, the Japanese didn't build a reputation necessarily just through reliability. They built it through innovation, whether it was the Cub, or I mean even the CT110, or I'm sure there's lots of Japanese bikes that you could think of that were so like, wow, new technology, new way of doing things. They set themselves apart. And I think that's what the Japanese have got to get back to. Things that set themselves apart from an innovation point of view. It's the only way for them to survive, it really is, because they ain't going to compete much longer on ride quality, or they're not going to stand apart from the Chinese on ride quality or power or performance or longevity, because this is a £6 bike, which I got to say, good buy. What is it, 700, 800 quid less than the equivalent Honda? Have we got a centre stand on it? Have we? I think we have. We've got a centre stand as standard, tubeless spoke wheels, rider modes, brilliant luggage that you can expect from the dealership for 700 quid. I mean, I feel like a record stuck, a broken record, but yeah. We're here, aren't we? We're here at this junction, quite appropriately in this video. We're at this junction. And we go left to China, or we go right to Japan. And quite coincidentally, left is downhill. And that feels the way in which the Chinese are rolling at the minute. They're rolling downhill. They're rolling, gathering speed, picking up momentum. Because the ground is going with them at the minute. They built the momentum and they're building the bikes to gather pace. The Japanese at the minute, they're rolling uphill. They've got to climb that hill somehow to get them back on an even keel. And as I say, I can only think innovation's the way forward for them, because they just can't beat their organisations are so stodgy. Like any organisation, whether it's your council or whether it's a big financial corporation or whatever it is, stodginess in the middle. Better get out of this bloke's way. Stodginess in the middle, which makes things move slowly and makes things expensive to operate, for a business to operate. And I think that's the biggest difference between Japan and China at the minute. The Chinese are running lean. However they run in China, I don't know, but their organisations are running lean, and they're running lean through the importers' use. They're not using shiny showrooms, they're not spending a fortune on marketing, they're not advertising in all the magazines, they're not having big trade shows, they're not sponsoring the TT. The money that they're saving on doing all that, they're taking out the cost of the bikes. So when people say, well, the difference in cost of the bike is because one's built much better built. No, I don't think that's true. I think it's because one organisation operates quite flabbily while the other one operates quite leanly. And I think while that stays that way, the Japanese are going to be slow to respond to what's coming. If they can twist their internal organs to focus on innovation, on new technology, new ways of doing things, much like they used to do in their early days. As I say, I think they've got a chance, but yeah. This bike now, these bikes now are too good to walk past them to play safe with a Japanese bike that's more expensive. That's my feeling now. Like, I'd buy this for £6,000. Why would I go and buy an NX500? It's got less power, less toys. It's got longer service intervals, so there's that element of it. But I can't, in my mental mindset, anything under £6,000, I worry about a warranty if it ever breaks down. But Voge's, I've got to be honest. I seem to be saying I've got to be honest a lot, which I'm sorry about. They don't seem to break down a lot. The issue they have, like all Chinese manufacturers or importers, is getting older parts. You know, the new bikes come in and go out that quickly. They just don't seem to supply a cache of parts or stock a cache of parts, which is where they need to improve, or where the supplying manufacturer needs to step up and offer it direct from source. But if you just wanted a bike that did this kind of riding and you got £6,000, I'd be down my Voge dealer. You know, and don't think me bias. I know, as I say, I sold some Voges last year. I registered as a dealer for a while. I don't think I'm still on that list, so you don't come to me wanting to buy one. But from an impartial point of view, close my eyes. How does it ride? Rides very well, thank you. How much is that? £6,000? Yeah, that'll do. This plastic's a bit like an egg container, a bit Tupperware-ish. Don't feel as premium as that new 800. That new 800, I think, from a quality point of view, has elevated the game on for Voge. It's a big step forward, but this ain't bad. It's a bit plastic fantastic. You know, yeah, there's a lot of melted down Tupperware boxes gone into it, but don't feel heavy. Feels like I've got a bit of protection. Yeah, happy days. Alright, cheers.